The wedding of the year glittered beneath the massive crystal chandeliers of the Beverly Hills Grand Hotel. Every corner of the marble hall was filled with the sound of violins playing gentle, sophisticated music, while waiters in white gloves glided across the room carrying silver trays of the finest caviar and golden-leafed macarons. It was a scene of absolute opulence, where champagne flutes sparkled in manicured hands held by the city's most powerful and elite. At the center of this glittering spectacle stood Ryan Mitchell. He was tall, handsome, and draped in a custom-tailored tuxedo that seemed to radiate a smug, untouchable confidence. Tonight was intended to be his ultimate triumph. He wasn't just marrying his new bride, Vanessa Brooks, a glamorous young model whose face graced the covers of numerous fashion magazines. He was determined to execute a plan to humiliate the one woman he despised the most, Emily Carter, his ex-wife. Only a year ago, Emily had been the quiet, devoted wife by his side. She had been the one who supported him through his early struggles, carrying his child and praying every night for the simple happiness of a united family. But when life turned harsh and she could no longer hide her physical and emotional struggles, Ryan discarded her like a piece of worthless trash. He filed for divorce with a cold, calculated efficiency, seized their house through legal loopholes, emptied their joint bank accounts, and left her completely alone while she was pregnant with triplets. The whispers around town were vicious, claiming she was ruined, powerless, and destined to be forgotten. That was exactly the narrative Ryan had worked so hard to create. So when he mailed her an invitation to his grand wedding, it wasn't out of a sudden moment of kindness or closure. It was bait. He wanted her to walk into that ballroom looking poor, broken, and desperate, so that every wealthy guest could laugh at her expense. He wanted the world to see the staggering difference between his glittering success and her supposed misery. He bragged to his friends over expensive scotch, saying, "Let her come crawling. Let them all see how far she's fallen. It will only make me look even greater in comparison." But Ryan had fundamentally underestimated Emily's spirit. The same woman he once mocked as weak and fragile had spent the last 12 months enduring sleepless nights with 3 newborns, surviving the sting of cruel social gossip, and swallowing every bitter tear until her heart turned into tempered steel. She didn't plan to crawl into his wedding for a handout. She knew that if she went, she would walk tall. She would not arrive alone, and she would not arrive as the victim he had scripted her to be. The night grew tense as rumors began to spread like wildfire through the ballroom. Some guests whispered that Emily would never dare to show up to such a high-profile event. Others chuckled into their drinks, imagining her slipping through the back door in borrowed, ill-fitting clothes. Vanessa Brooks, the bride, smirked as she adjusted her diamond bracelet, certain that her youthful presence would crush Emily's spirit completely. Ryan raised his glass high, already savoring the anticipated triumph of the humiliation he had prepared. Then, the Grand Hotel doors swung wide open. Gasps spread like fire through the room, silencing the quartet and the shallow laughter. A sleek, black-stretch limousine had just pulled up to the entrance, and out stepped Emily Carter. She was no longer the tired, abandoned woman the public remembered. Tonight, she was a vision of regal elegance. She wore an exquisite gown that shimmered brilliantly beneath the chandeliers. Her hair swept back like a queen's, and her steps were graceful and unshaken. At her side walked Alexander Harrington, one of the city's most mysterious and powerful billionaires. His presence was commanding, his hand resting gently yet protectively on Emily's back. And behind them, 3 little children in matching tiny tuxedos and dresses followed, wide-eyed and innocent. They were the triplets, Ryan's children. The music faltered as the musicians lost their place. Champagne glasses froze midair. Whispers turned into a stunned, heavy silence. And Ryan's smug smile disappeared for the very first time. Before this dazzling entrance that shook the Beverly Hills wedding to its core, Emily Carter's life had been carved out of deep shadows and immense sacrifice. She was not born into privilege. She grew up in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Phoenix, raised by a single mother who worked 2 grueling jobs just to keep food on the table and the lights on. From an early age, Emily learned to value the simple, meaningful things: warm meals, second-hand clothes, and the kind of love that was measured not in diamonds, but in daily sacrifices. At 22, Emily believed she had finally found her fairy tale when she met Ryan Mitchell. He was older, confident, and a rising businessman with smooth words and an easy, practiced smile. To Emily, he seemed like a savior, a man who promised her the life she never had. He spoke of a home filled with comfort and a family built on stability and dreams bigger than her world had ever allowed. Against her mother's quiet, intuitive warnings, Emily gave him her heart and soon after her sacred vows. The early days of their marriage seemed beautiful, almost perfect. Ryan spoiled her with flowers, whispered promises of a forever together, and swore he adored her innocence and purity. Emily, believing in love with all her soul, became the perfect wife. She gave up her small job as a receptionist to support Ryan's demanding career, managing every detail of their home and caring for his every need. She thought love meant total sacrifice. She thought her unwavering loyalty would be enough to sustain them. But as Ryan's wealth and ambition grew, his warmth began to fade, replaced by a cold, distant arrogance. He no longer looked at Emily as his partner and equal, but as dead weight holding him back from higher social circles. When Emily became pregnant with news that filled her with trembling joy and hope, Ryan's true, ugly nature finally revealed itself. Instead of celebrating the miracle, he scoffed at her. "You can't even provide for yourself," he sneered during one of his frequent outbursts. "How will you provide for three?" Because fate had written its own cruel twist, Emily was carrying triplets. What should have been a miracle became her greatest burden in his eyes. The medical bills, the crushing exhaustion, and the fear of the unknown. Emily faced it all alone. Ryan stopped coming home, stopped answering her desperate calls, and eventually pushed her out of their house with nothing but a suitcase and a breaking heart. While he flaunted his success in glittering suits and expensive cars, Emily slept on a friend's worn-out couch, clutching her swelling belly and whispering promises to the 3 children inside her. "I will protect you no matter what," she would sob into the night. The nights were long, and tears became her only lullaby. She worked grueling part-time jobs while heavily pregnant, scrubbing office floors and folding endless piles of clothes in laundromats to save every single dollar for diapers. Strangers stared, some pitied her, while others mocked her. Her body ached, and her spirit cracked, but she never surrendered. Every kick in her womb reminded her that her fight wasn't just for herself. It was for 3 little souls who needed her strength. When the babies were born, 2 boys and 1 girl, Emily's world shifted again. The exhaustion doubled, but so did her courage. She rocked them to sleep while hiding her tears, humming the same lullabies her mother once sang to her. She fed them with trembling hands, sometimes skipping meals herself, so they would have enough to grow. Poverty pressed hard against her, but love made her unbreakable. The world may have called her a poor, discarded ex-wife, and Ryan may have laughed at her misery from his ivory tower, but Emily Carter carried something far stronger than money or status: resilience. It was that resilience, sharpened by pain and polished by sacrifice, that would make her entrance into Ryan's wedding not a moment of humiliation, but of absolute triumph. The girl he abandoned had become a woman he could never destroy. The Beverly Hills Grand Hotel was a palace disguised as a hotel. Its ballroom stretched wider than a football field, lined with massive marble pillars and chandeliers dripping with 1,000 crystals. Tonight, every inch of it was designed not just for celebration, but for a calculated spectacle. Ryan Mitchell wanted his wedding to Vanessa Brooks to scream wealth, power, and ultimate triumph. He wanted every guest to know that he had risen to the top, leaving his pitiful past and his poor ex-wife far behind him. Gold-trimmed invitations had been sent weeks earlier to the city's elite: investors, politicians, celebrities, and business magnates. The event had even been featured in lifestyle magazines, hyped as the union of the season. Reporters clustered outside, their cameras ready to capture each luxurious, superficial detail. Limousines lined the driveway, delivering guests dressed in couture gowns and tuxedos that cost more than a year's rent for ordinary families. Inside, the air buzzed with shallow laughter and expensive champagne toasts. Waiters in white gloves circled with trays of fresh oysters and lobster tails, while a string quartet filled the air with the works of Mozart. At the head of the hall stood Ryan, flashing the smug smile of a man who believed he had truly won at life. His arm draped proudly around Vanessa, a vision in her designer gown, sparkling diamonds, and smug confidence. Vanessa, only 26, basked in the attention. Once a minor model struggling for recognition, she now stood beside a wealthy groom in a wedding worth millions. She leaned into Ryan, whispering sweet nothings and smirking as if the ballroom was her personal stage. The cameras loved her, and she loved every flash of the bulb. She didn't care that whispers about Ryan's ex-wife lingered in the corners of the room. In fact, she hoped Emily would come. Vanessa longed to see her rival crumble in a public setting. Ryan's groomsmen clapped him on the back, congratulating him on his upgrade. Guests raised their glasses, not just to celebrate love, but to cement alliances and secure future business deals. In this glittering hall, everything had a price: love, loyalty, and even dignity. And Ryan reveled in it. He raised his champagne flute high and declared, "Tonight, I leave the past behind me. Only success lies ahead." But the truth was, Ryan hadn't invited Emily just to flaunt his new life. He wanted a show. He wanted to prove that while he soared, she had sunk. Some guests, aware of the bitter divorce, snickered at the thought of Emily arriving in a second-hand dress, perhaps looking frail, tired, and broken. "She'll probably come begging," Ryan joked earlier that evening, "and we'll all have a good laugh." The orchestra swelled as the ceremony prepared to begin. The officiant stood ready, the flower arrangements perfumed the air, and the ballroom brimmed with anticipation. Yet beneath the glamour, a quiet tension simmered. Everyone wondered, would Emily actually come? By the grand entrance doors, a hush suddenly rippled through the crowd. A valet rushed inside, whispering something urgent to the maitre d'. The music faltered, and heads turned toward the golden doors, waiting and wondering. Ryan smirked, convinced that his trap was about to spring. Vanessa's smile widened, hungry for the spectacle. Guests leaned forward, curious and eager for drama. None of them knew that the woman about to step through those doors would not be the broken, pitiful ex-wife they expected. She would be the storm that shattered their perfect, expensive illusion. Ryan Mitchell had perfected the art of deception. To the guests in the Beverly Hills ballroom, he looked like the ideal groom, charming, successful, and a man who had climbed the ladder of wealth to claim the ultimate prize. But beneath the tuxedo and the rehearsed smile hid a man whose ambition had always been fueled by a profound cruelty. Ryan's journey to success wasn't paved with hard work alone. It was carved from betrayal, shortcuts, and broken promises. When he married Emily years ago, he had little more than a modest salary and big dreams. Emily's quiet devotion and her willingness to sacrifice gave him the stability he needed to climb. But as soon as his career started to take off, Ryan began to see her as baggage. He complained about her plain looks, mocked her for not keeping up with his wealthy colleagues' wives, and belittled her every effort to hold the family together. When Emily revealed she was carrying triplets, Ryan's mask slipped entirely. Instead of joy, his eyes filled with cold calculation. 3 children meant more expenses, more responsibility, and less freedom to chase wealth and pleasure. "You've ruined my life," he spat one night, slamming the door as she cried on the floor in pain. From then on, his visits home grew fewer. His excuses grew wilder until he finally threw her out. To him, Emily was just a chapter he wanted erased from his book of life. Enter Vanessa Brooks, the glittering replacement. Vanessa was everything Emily was not, at least in Ryan's eyes. She was young, glamorous, and came from a wealthy circle. But behind the makeup and designer gowns was a woman as calculating as Ryan himself. She saw in him not love, but opportunity. With Ryan, she could secure the lifestyle she craved, the diamonds, the yachts, and the mansion parties. It was Vanessa who encouraged Ryan to flaunt his new life, and who sneered at the very mention of Emily. "Invite her," she had whispered when the wedding plans began. "Let her see what she lost. Let everyone see what you gained." Her cruelty wasn't just about proving herself superior. It was about crushing any potential threat to her new position as the Mrs. Mitchell. Together, Ryan and Vanessa were a perfect storm of arrogance and greed. They fed off each other's vanity, blind to the whispers around them. Some guests admired their boldness, while others shook their heads, sensing an inevitable disaster. But neither Ryan nor Vanessa cared. They believed they were untouchable, above judgment, and destined for a life of endless indulgence. As Ryan paraded Vanessa around the ballroom, his laughter rang hollow, but his pride swelled with every envious glance. He relished the thought of Emily walking in pale and frail, confirming to the world that he had indeed upgraded. Vanessa clung to his arm, her diamond bracelet catching the light, her eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation. They thought they had scripted the perfect play, Emily as the tragic figure, Ryan as the triumphant groom, and Vanessa as the dazzling prize. But the story they tried to write was about to collapse, because the woman they had dismissed as weak had transformed, and the empire they flaunted was built on sand, waiting for the tide to wash it all away. And tonight, that tide was coming. The plan to humiliate Emily wasn't just born out of Ryan's arrogance. It was carefully crafted and whispered in late-night conversations between him and Vanessa. While florists arranged thousands of roses and planners rehearsed the timing of the ceremony, Ryan and Vanessa plotted cruelty behind closed doors. "Are you sure she'll come?" Vanessa had asked one evening as they lounged in their penthouse suite. She sipped expensive champagne, her diamond ring glinting in the city lights. "She'll come," Ryan replied confidently. "Emily's too proud to ignore the invitation. And even if she doesn't want to, curiosity will eat her alive. She'll want to see me, to see what she lost." Vanessa smirked. "Good. Because when she walks through those doors, she'll realize she doesn't belong here, and everyone else will realize it too." They rehearsed the moment in their heads over and over. Ryan imagined Emily slipping in, dressed in something outdated, maybe clutching a handbag she bought from a discount store. He pictured her standing awkwardly at the edge of the ballroom, while photographers snapped pictures of him with Vanessa in her glittering gown. It would be perfect, an unspoken comparison that painted Emily as pathetic and Vanessa as victorious. But Vanessa wanted more than just a comparison. She wanted total destruction. "Let's make sure the press notices her," she suggested. "I'll tell the photographers where to look. We'll smile for the cameras with her standing right there, invisible beside us. She'll look like a ghost from your past, haunting your success." Ryan loved the idea. "And after the vows, I'll make a toast," he added. "Something subtle. Something that thanks everyone who supported me when others couldn't. Everyone will know I'm talking about her. They'll laugh behind their glasses of champagne, and she'll crumble." Their cruelty deepened with every word. Vanessa giggled, imagining Emily's tears. Ryan grinned, savoring the thought of his ex-wife shrinking under the weight of his staged triumph. For them, the wedding wasn't about love. It was about power, about proving that they had won and Emily had lost. Even the seating arrangements reflected their malice. Ryan instructed the planner to keep a single chair empty near the back, just in case the ex-wife shows up. He told the caterer to make note of it, too. Vanessa, with a wicked sparkle in her eye, ensured that the table closest to that chair was filled with gossip-hungry socialites who would waste no time spreading whispers. By the morning of the wedding, the plan was set. Ryan stood before the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks and smiling at his reflection. "Tonight," he told himself, "I erase her completely." Vanessa, slipping into her gown, whispered, "And tonight I become the only Mrs. Mitchell anyone will ever remember." Neither of them imagined that their stage, polished with gold and champagne, was about to collapse under the weight of truth. Because Emily was not walking into their trap as the broken woman they expected. She was walking in with a strength they had never seen, and with allies powerful enough to turn their cruel plan into their ultimate downfall. The trap they set for Emily was about to snap shut, but not on her. It was going to snap shut on them. The night before Ryan's wedding, Emily sat on the edge of a worn sofa in her tiny, cramped apartment, her head in her hands. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering lamp, its bulb casting long, jagged shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Around her, toys were scattered across the floor, baby bottles sat half-empty on the counter, and the faint, rhythmic cries of her triplets drifted from the bedroom. She rocked slowly, exhaustion heavy in her bones. Life had not been kind since Ryan had thrown her out. She had scraped by, piecing together multiple part-time jobs just to keep food on the table. She scrubbed offices at night, folded clothes at a laundromat during the day, and babysat for neighbors whenever she could find a spare hour. Her hands were cracked from cleaning chemicals, her back ached from long shifts, and her eyes burned for months without real sleep. The world seemed eager to remind her of her failure. Former friends avoided her calls, whispering that she had married above her station and gotten exactly what she deserved. Strangers glanced at her belly and later at her stroller with judgment in their eyes. 3 children, no husband, no money. Even at the grocery store, she felt the sting of pity when she used food stamps to buy formula. That night, as she tucked her children into bed, she couldn't stop the tears from streaming down her cheeks. "I promise my babies," she whispered, brushing soft hair from their foreheads, "I won't let you grow up thinking you're not wanted. Even if I have to break, I will never let you feel abandoned." But inside, she was breaking. The gold-trimmed invitation to Ryan's wedding sat on the kitchen table, its elegance gleaming mockingly in the dim light. She had almost thrown it away the day it arrived. Yet here it was, a cruel reminder that while she struggled to survive, Ryan lived in luxury, celebrating with chandeliers and champagne. She knew the invitation wasn't about courtesy. It was about cruelty. He wanted her there. He wanted her humiliated. She pressed the card to her chest and sobbed, torn between fury and despair. A part of her wanted to burn it to refuse him the satisfaction, but another part, deeper and stronger, whispered that she couldn't run forever. She had spent too long hiding, too long shrinking from the world's judgment. Maybe it was time to face it, no matter how painful it might be. Still, fear gripped her. She imagined walking into that ballroom in her plain, worn dress, clutching her children while every pair of eyes judged her and every laugh pierced her like a knife. She imagined Ryan smirking, Vanessa's cruel smile, and the guests whispering, "There's the poor ex-wife. Look how far she's fallen." Her heart ached with shame. She wasn't sure she could endure it. That night, as the rain tapped against her window, Emily curled up on the sofa and let the weight of her life crush her. She cried until her throat burned, until exhaustion finally dragged her into a restless sleep. In her dreams, she saw Ryan's face sneering, telling her she was nothing. She saw Vanessa laughing, dripping in jewels, and she saw herself alone, broken and invisible. Emily didn't know it yet, but the storm she felt inside was the very fire that would soon carry her into that ballroom, not as a victim, but as a force neither Ryan nor Vanessa could ever silence. Because rock bottom wasn't her ending. It was the beginning of her rise. Morning light filtered weakly through the thin curtains of Emily's apartment, highlighting the exhaustion etched into her face. She had barely slept, her mind looping between fear of humiliation and the quiet rage burning in her chest. Her triplets stirred in their crib, tiny hands reaching out, reminding her of the only reason she kept going. She bent to kiss each of them, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. A knock at the door startled her. She hesitated, pulling her worn sweater tighter. Visitors were rare. When she opened the door, she froze. Standing in the hallway was Alexander Harrington. Emily knew of him. Everyone in the city did. He was the elusive billionaire investor who rarely appeared in public outside of charity events. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with eyes that carried the weight of too many storms, Alexander was a figure both admired and feared. She had seen his name in newspapers tied to powerful deals and hospital donations, but she never expected him to stand at her door. "Emily Carter," his voice was calm and steady. "I hope I'm not intruding." Confused, she nodded. "Yes, that's me. But why are you here?" He glanced past her into the modest apartment, at the toys, the crib, and the evidence of her daily struggle. For a moment, his jaw tightened. Then he met her eyes. "Because I know what he did to you, and because I've seen this story before." Emily stiffened, suspicion rising. "If Ryan sent you..." Ryan didn't send me, Alexander interrupted firmly. I'm here because I watched my own mother go through what you're living now. My father left her for another woman when she was sick. She died of cancer alone. Years later, my wife. His voice faltered for just a second before he forced himself to continue. My wife fought cancer too. I did everything I could, but I still lost her. I know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer because of cruelty and betrayal, and I swore I would never stand by if I saw it happen again. Emily's breath caught. The hardness in his voice wasn't pity. It was pain carved deep from his own scars. I don't want your charity, she whispered, ashamed of the tremble in her tone. Alexander shook his head. This isn't charity. This is justice. Ryan thinks he can parade his cruelty without consequence. He's wrong. You don't have to fight him alone. She stared at him, her heart torn between disbelief and a fragile hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Why would a man like him, with all his wealth and power, care about her? But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no judgment and no mockery, only recognition, as if her pain mirrored his own. I can't walk into that wedding, Emily said, her voice breaking. Not like this. Not when he wants me to fall apart. Then don't walk in as his victim, Alexander replied softly. Walk in as the woman he underestimated. I'll make sure of it. The promise in his voice was ironclad. For the first time in years, Emily felt the faintest spark of strength return to her chest. What she didn't yet realize was that this man, rebuilt by compassion, was about to turn Ryan's cruel stage into the battlefield of his downfall. And Alexander Harrington never entered a battle he couldn't win. The days leading up to Ryan's wedding blurred together for Emily, caught between caring for her triplets and battling the doubts clawing at her chest. She wondered if she had made a mistake even considering Alexander's offer. Every time she looked at the invitation on her table, she felt the weight of Ryan's cruelty pressing down. He wanted her humiliated. He wanted her broken. But Alexander Harrington wasn't a man who made empty promises. On the morning of the wedding, a sleek black limousine waited outside her apartment. Emily stared through the window in disbelief, clutching her children close. The neighbors peeked from their doors, whispering in shock. For the first time in years, she wasn't leaving the house with a stroller and worry lines. She was stepping into something extraordinary. Emily, Alexander said, offering his hand as she approached the car. Today isn't about him. It's about you reclaiming your dignity. Let me help you show the world who you really are. Inside the limousine, the leather seats gleamed. Soft music filled the air, and a stylist waited with racks of breathtaking gowns. Emily gasped. This is too much. I can't. Alexander shook his head. You've given up enough. Let me give something back. The stylist guided her through the dresses, each more stunning than the last. At first, Emily hesitated, her fingers trembling as she touched the silks and satins. But when she slipped into a deep sapphire gown, the room seemed to shift. The fabric hugged her frame perfectly, the color illuminated her eyes. And for the first time in years, she didn't see a tired mother in the mirror. She saw a woman reborn. Her children, dressed in tiny tuxedos and matching dresses, clapped their hands with innocent delight. "Mommy, you look like a princess," one of the boys shouted, his voice pure with pride. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she hugged them. They had only ever seen her in worn clothes and weary smiles. Tonight, they saw her strength shining. Makeup brushed away the shadows of sleepless nights. Soft curls framed her face. A diamond pendant, Alexander's quiet gift, rested on her collarbone, catching the light. She touched it nervously, but he said simply, "Consider it armor." As the limousine rolled toward the Beverly Hills Grand Hotel, Emily's nerves twisted into knots. She imagined Ryan's smirk, Vanessa's laughter, and the whispers of the crowd. Her palms were damp with fear. Alexander noticed. "Do you know what makes a storm powerful, Emily?" he asked quietly. She glanced at him, puzzled. "It doesn't ask permission. It just arrives. Tonight, you are that storm." She exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. For years, she had been shrinking, hiding, and trying to survive. But tonight, she would not hide. Tonight, She would walk into that ballroom not as Ryan's discarded ex-wife, but as the woman he never truly knew. The limousine slowed before the glowing entrance of the hotel. Photographers clustered outside, their cameras flashing at every arriving guest. The moment the doors opened, the crowd gasped. Emily stepped out, radiant, her children trailing like royal heirs, with Alexander at her side exuding quiet power. For the first time in years, the world wasn't laughing at her. It was in awe. And inside, Ryan's perfect stage was about to become his greatest humiliation. The Beverly Hills Grand Hotel glittered like a kingdom of gold. That night, guests swirled across the ballroom in expensive gowns and tuxedos, their laughter echoing under chandeliers heavy with crystals. The string quartet played a delicate tune as champagne flowed like water. To the elite gathered there, the night was a showcase of wealth and power. But within minutes, it would become something far more unforgettable. The golden doors at the entrance opened slowly, almost ceremoniously. And the first sound to break the music was the collective gasp of the crowd. Outside, the sleek limousine reflected the floodlights. Photographers pressed forward, their shouts rising above the music. "Who is it? Who's arriving now?" And then she stepped out, Emily Carter, no longer the weary mother scraping by in silence. Tonight, she was a vision. Her sapphire gown shimmered with every step. Her hair cascaded in soft curls, and her diamond pendant caught the light like a crown jewel. Her back was straight, her chin lifted, and her eyes were calm yet fierce. She carried herself with the grace of a queen who had nothing left to fear. The murmurs grew louder. "Is that her? Ryan's ex-wife? She looks incredible. I thought she was struggling." But Emily wasn't alone. Beside her walked Alexander Harrington, the enigmatic billionaire whose presence alone could silence any room. The sight of him escorting her sent shockwaves rippling through the ballroom. Guests leaned in to whisper frantically, "Why is she with him? Alexander never brings anyone to these events. What does this mean?" And then the final blow. 3 small figures emerged from the limousine. Emily's triplets, dressed in tiny tuxedos and a sparkling dress. Their wide eyes reflected innocence and pride. They clung to their mother's hands, oblivious to the chaos their presence caused. Gasps turned into stunned silence. Whispers hissed across the hall like fire. "They're his children. They look just like Ryan. My God, he abandoned them." Inside the ballroom, Ryan's confident smirk froze on his lips. His champagne flute trembled slightly in his hand. For weeks, he had boasted about the humiliation Emily would bring upon herself if she dared show up. But as he watched her glide into the room with a billionaire at her side and 3 living reminders of his betrayal trailing behind, the humiliation was entirely his. Vanessa's face hardened, her painted smile cracking at the edges. She gripped Ryan's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "What is she doing here? And with him?" she hissed. The orchestra faltered, missing notes as every musician turned their eyes toward the entrance. All eyes followed Emily as she stepped onto the polished marble floor, her heels clicking in rhythm with the pounding hearts around her. Emily did not rush. She did not shrink. She moved with steady confidence, her gaze fixed forward, ignoring the whispers and ignoring Ryan's pale face. She wasn't here to be their victim. She was here to reclaim her dignity. And as the doors closed behind her, sealing the silence, one truth became clear to everyone in that glittering hall. The woman they expected to pity had arrived as the one they could only admire. The silence in the ballroom stretched like glass, ready to shatter at any moment. Emily stood tall, Alexander at her side, the triplets clinging to her hands. The whispers grew louder, a storm of curiosity and scandal. Ryan felt every pair of eyes drifting from him and Vanessa to the woman he had hoped to bury in shame. Rage burned through his chest. This was not the scene he had planned. She was supposed to appear small, weak, and desperate. Instead, she had stolen the spotlight. His pride demanded action. He stepped forward, forcing a grin onto his face and raising his champagne glass. "Well, well," he said, his voice echoing across the marble floor. "Look who decided to show up. My ex-wife. How touching." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, His tone dripped with venom disguised as charm. Vanessa tightened her grip on his arm, smirking and encouraging him. Ryan moved closer, circling Emily like a predator. "Tell me, Emily, did you borrow that gown? Or perhaps Mr. Harrington here bought it for you? It must feel strange, doesn't it? Walking into a place like this after living in, what was it, a rundown apartment?" Laughter bubbled at the edges of the crowd, hesitant and unsure. Emily's heart hammered in her chest, but she refused to lower her eyes. She opened her mouth to respond, but Alexander's steady hand on her back stopped her. His calm presence told her, "Not yet." Ryan wasn't finished. He leaned closer, his voice sharper now. "And bringing the children, my God. Emily, was that for sympathy? Or did you hope someone here would take pity and write you a check?" A ripple of gasps spread through the guests. The cruelty of his words struck deep, echoing across the hall. The triplets clutched Emily tighter, sensing the tension. For a moment, Emily felt the old shame rise, the familiar sting of his mockery. But then she caught Alexander's eyes, steady and unshaken, and she remembered she was not alone. Before she could speak, Alexander stepped forward. His voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of authority that silenced the entire room. "You speak of pity, Mr. Mitchell," he said, his gaze unwavering. "But what I see before me is not a woman to be pitied. I see a woman who has endured more than you could ever bear, and she has done it with dignity." Ryan's smirk faltered, but he forced a laugh. "And who are you to lecture me?" Alexander's lips curved into a cold smile. "I am the man who stands beside her when you chose to walk away. I am the man who sees her worth, while you discarded it. And I am the man who will ensure the world knows the truth about the kind of husband you were." The room erupted in whispers. Vanessa paled, sensing the shift. Ryan's mask cracked, anger flashing across his face. "This is my wedding," he barked. "You don't belong here." Emily finally stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "No, Ryan, you're wrong. I belong here more than you think. Because while you celebrate your new life, you can never erase me or the children you abandoned. We are living proof of the man you truly are." Gasps filled the room. Guests turned, their eyes now sharp with judgment. Ryan opened his mouth to retort, but no words came. For the first time, he was the one left speechless, and in that silence, his carefully built empire of lies began to crack. The ballroom buzzed with uneasy whispers. Emily's words had struck like lightning, but it was Alexander who now commanded the storm. Standing tall, his presence radiated quiet authority. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Enough," he snapped. "This circus ends now. Security." But Alexander raised a hand, silencing him effortlessly. "Before you try to throw her out, Mr. Mitchell, perhaps you should worry about what I've brought with me tonight." The crowd shifted, curiosity sparking like wildfire. Ryan forced a laugh. "And what exactly have you brought? Pity? Empty speeches?" Alexander's gaze sharpened. "What I have," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "is the truth." He pulled out a slim black folder and placed it on the nearest table. With deliberate calm, he opened it, revealing neatly stacked documents. "These," Alexander announced, "are financial records. Records that prove Ryan Mitchell has been embezzling funds from his company for over 2 years." Gasps erupted. Glasses clinked against marble as guests exchanged shocked glances. Ryan's face drained of color. "Lies," he shouted. "Those are fabricated." But Alexander was relentless. "Not fabricated, verified. Bank transfers routed through offshore accounts. Shell companies masking losses, and stolen funds redirected into your personal lifestyle. Vacations, cars, even this wedding. You invited Emily here to humiliate her. Instead, you invited her to witness your downfall." Vanessa clutched Ryan's arm, panic flickering in her eyes. "Ryan, is it true?" she whispered. "Of course not," he barked. Alexander leaned forward. "Bluffing? Then why, Ryan? Do I have signed correspondence between you and your accountant? Why do I have recordings of your phone calls authorizing these transfers?" The room exploded in whispers again. Investors shifted uneasily. Politicians slipped toward the exits. Even Ryan's closest friends looked away. Emily stood still, her heart pounding. For years, she had dreamed of Ryan facing consequences, and now, justice was unfolding before her eyes. Ryan's mask cracked completely. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "This is a setup. You all know me. I built my empire with hard work." But no one believed him anymore. His voice sounded hollow and pathetic. Alexander straightened, closing the folder with quiet finality. "Hard work doesn't leave a trail of stolen millions, Mr. Mitchell. Your empire is built on lies, and tonight those lies end." For a moment, the ballroom was silent. Then a guest muttered, "He's finished." And just like that, the tide turned. The man who had orchestrated a night of humiliation now stood exposed, his empire crumbling before the very people he sought to impress. The room swirled with chaos. Ryan Mitchell was unraveling. Beside him, Vanessa Brooks felt her perfect world begin to collapse. Her grip on his arm loosened. The whispers stung. Gold digger. She chose him for his money, and now there's none left. Vanessa's stomach turned. She hadn't traded her youth to stand beside a ruined man. "Ryan," she hissed, "tell me he's lying." But she saw the sweat on his brow and the emptiness in his eyes. Vanessa took a sharp step back. Ryan's head whipped toward her. "What are you doing?" "I'm not going down with you," she snapped, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. "I didn't sign up to marry a criminal." The crowd erupted. For the first time that night, it was the woman he had chosen over his wife who humiliated him. Vanessa slipped the diamond ring from her finger and held it up. "Your name is worth nothing now." She dropped the ring onto the marble floor. It clattered loudly, echoing through the silence. Ryan lunged toward her, but security stepped between them. Vanessa turned on her heel and stormed out of the ballroom, photographers scrambling after her. Ryan stood frozen, his bride gone, his empire exposed, and his dignity shredded. Emily watched it all, her children holding her hands tightly. The man who tried to erase her was being erased himself. The ballroom was silent once more. Ryan tried to regain control, forcing a bitter laugh. "You people are fools. Don't forget, she's nothing without me." Emily's fingers tightened around her children's hands. For years, those words had poisoned her. But tonight, she realized she no longer feared them. She stepped forward. "You say I'm nothing without you, Ryan, but the truth is I became everything without you." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emily lifted her chin. "When he threw me out, I was pregnant with 3 triplets. These are your children, Ryan. You left me to raise them alone." Gasps echoed. "While you dined in luxury, I worked nights scrubbing offices and folding laundry. My hands cracked, and my back ached, but I kept going. Not for me, for them." She glanced down at her children. "Every tear I swallowed, every meal I skipped, it was all so they would never feel unwanted. You told me I ruined your life, Ryan, but these children didn't ruin mine. They saved it." The crowd erupted in outrage against Ryan. Shameful. How could he abandon his own blood? Ryan's face twisted. "She's lying. How do you know they're mine?" But the resemblance was undeniable, the same jawline, the same dark eyes. Alexander stepped closer. "She doesn't need to prove anything. The truth will outlast every lie you've built." Emily's final words were steady. "You tried to erase me, Ryan, but in these children, you can never erase yourself." The room thundered with applause. Emily's truth had pierced through the glittering facade. Before Ryan could say another word, the ballroom doors burst open. 2 uniformed officers and a detective strode inside. "Ryan Mitchell, you are under investigation for embezzlement, tax fraud, and money laundering. We have a warrant for your arrest." Ryan staggered back. "No, this is Harrington's doing." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "No, Ryan, this is justice catching up to you." Ryan turned wildly to the crowd, but his allies averted their eyes. The officers seized his arms, cuffing him. He struggled, thrashing. "This isn't fair. I'm Ryan Mitchell." The detective's voice cut through his panic. "You made a mess, and now you'll answer for it." Emily watched as the man who tried to break her was dragged away in handcuffs. Hatred and fear burned in his gaze as he spat. "You'll regret this, Emily." But his threats fell hollow. As the doors slammed shut behind him, the ballroom exhaled in relief. Ryan Mitchell had entered the night as a groom. He was leaving as a prisoner. Outside, Vanessa Brooks was fleeing in shame, her designer gown dragging across the pavement. She tried to call her secret safety net, a wealthy investor named Victor, but he dismissed her coldly. "You're radioactive. Don't call me again." Vanessa stared at the screen, her stomach sinking. Within weeks, she was bankrupt and forced to sell everything. Alone in a dingy apartment, she realized she had chained herself to a sinking ship. Meanwhile, the ballroom was quiet. Emily stood at the center, her triplets clinging to her. "Mommy, are we safe now?" one of her sons whispered. Emily crouched down, kissing their hair. "Yes, babies. We're safe now." The crowd, moved by the moment, fell silent. Many were ashamed for believing Ryan's lies. Emily rose slowly, her tears a mark of triumph. "Strength isn't measured by wealth," she told the crowd. "It's measured by what you survive. And I survived everything he tried to destroy me with." Alexander stepped forward, taking the microphone. "Emily Carter, you are more powerful than you know. And you are not alone anymore." He bent down to the triplets. "Children, I promise you this. I will never abandon you. I will protect you and love you as if you were my own." Alexander then turned to Emily and pulled out a small velvet box. He dropped to one knee. "Emily, you reminded me that love is about resilience. I don't want to just stand beside you tonight. I want to stand beside you for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" Emily's tears spilled freely. She dropped to her knees in front of him and whispered, "Yes, yes, I will." Applause thundered through the hall. The triplets squealed with joy, wrapping their arms around them. Emily felt a future filled with love, not fear. The night of Ryan's downfall became a parable. Emily Carter became a symbol of dignity. She and Alexander launched a foundation for single mothers, offering hope to those who were overlooked. Ryan was convicted, and his empire reduced to ashes. One evening, Emily stood on her balcony, watching the sunset with Alexander and her children. "Do you know what the greatest victory is?" she asked. "It's not revenge. It's knowing I rose. It's choosing to live fully and never again doubt my worth." Alexander kissed her forehead. "And you'll never have to doubt it again." Emily held her children close, her heart swelling with gratitude. The story that began with cruelty ended with compassion. To every woman watching, you are stronger than the storms that try to break you. There is always a tomorrow where you can rise again. So that's how the story ends, my wonderful friends. You're still here with me until this very moment, aren't you? If you really stayed this far, it means something inside this story touched your heart in a way you can't quite explain. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded you of your own inner strength. Life often brings us betrayal, pain, and moments when we feel completely abandoned. But as the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Emily's journey shows us that no matter how cruel the world can be, we are never truly powerless. We can rise, we can heal, and we can even turn our deepest wounds into the very source of our courage. So tonight, let this story be your reminder. You are stronger than the storms that try to break you. You deserve love, dignity, and a future that is much brighter than your past. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need a spark of hope, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to keep telling stories that don't just entertain, but remind us all how to keep going and how to rise. We truly appreciate you being part of our community. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next inspiring story.